Many of you who watch the Young Turks regularly have probably noticed by now that I have deep disdain for the state's governor, Gavin Newsom. Now, Gavin Newsom has a long list of issues that I would love to share with you in great detail. And as a result, I'm thinking about doing a recurring segment explaining to you why it is that I have this disdain for Governor Newsom. Today, I want to focus on what I would argue is one of the most egregious actions Newsom has taken to protect private utility companies that have sparked deadly fires in this state. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will infuriate you, and it should infuriate you. While the corporate media loves to put this nice gloss on Governor Newsom, I want to tell you what he's really about. Now, nearly 5 years ago, California suffered the deadliest and most destructive fire in the state's history when Pacific Gas and Electric's 97-year-old equipment failed and sparked the Camp Fire. The blaze began on November 8th, 2018 in Northern California's Butte County. Winds rapidly drove the fire downhill through developed communities, causing the deaths of 85 people, the injuries of dozens of firefighters, and the destruction of 18,000 structures. An estimated 30,000 Californians either lost their homes or suffered severe damage. The towns of Paradise and Conco suffered the brunt of the damage, with around 95% of their communities absolutely burned to ash. And in the end, the total cost of rebuilding after the fire was more than $16 billion. But Gavin Newsom, the state's governor, helped PG&E skirt responsibility. Media have reported over and over again that the fire was sparked due to a faulty electric transmission line belonging to PG&E. But in reality, it was a nearly 100-year-old C-hook holding up the power lines that finally broke, causing active power lines to fall onto the dry forest floor. An FBI investigation found that PG&E knew that their outdated equipment was a huge risk. In fact, they simply allowed these aging hooks to remain in place until they broke, and we have evidence that they knew that this was a problem. Documents show that as far back as 1987 and as recently as 2017, PG&E commissioned reviews of the aging hooks that made it very clear that they would fall apart after 80 to 100 years of use. But PG&E did nothing about it. After all, replacing the hooks would cut into their profits. According to local ABC 10 reporter Brandon Rittemann's investigative reporting, it would have cost PG&E just $10 to replace the aging hook. For anyone who didn't follow the story closely, it appeared as though PG&E surprisingly took responsibility for sparking the fire. The power company pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. After all, it was their faulty equipment that sparked the fire in the first place. Prosecutors successfully convicted the company, but as we know, convicting a company is very different from holding individuals liable. Even so, Governor Gavin Newsom made sure that PG&E was actually rewarded for their bad behavior. As Butte County Deputy District Attorney Mark Noel declared, "I think there's a lot of enabling going on in Sacramento. The enabler in chief is none other than Governor Newsom." In 2019, as prosecutors were building their case against the utility company, PG&E filed for bankruptcy in an effort to protect their business. I mean, this is common with a lot of corporations. They'll usually file for bankruptcy in order to protect their resources, to protect their money, protect their business. But that same month, Newsom took office and declared that, quote, "We gotta give PG&E a chance." But here's the thing, the utility company had already been given many chances and was even on federal probation for its role in the San Bruno gas explosion, which killed 8 people. But Newsom took bribes from PG&E in the form of campaign donations when he first ran for governor in 2018. Despite PG&E's status as a convicted felon, Newsom had no problem taking their money. In July of 2019, the governor was asked by reporters how he could be trusted to hold PG&E accountable, considering the utility company spent more than $208,000 to get Newsom elected. His answer was telling. Quote, "I wish you luck with whatever you're working on, but that's a strange question." A strange question? How the hell is that a strange question, you corrupt sack of crap? Now, in July of 2019, Newsom was asked whether he would return the money to PG&E, considering the company's criminality and the lives lost as a result of it. Newsom responded, "No. If the suggestion is that somehow contributions have changed actions, look what I just passed." What Newsom was referring to was legislation that made it look like safety measures were going to be put in place to prevent these private utilities from causing all this pain and destruction. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Once in office, Newsom hired private attorneys from O'Melveny and Myers to write a bill called AB 1054. Sure, laws are thought to be written by elected lawmakers, but not in this case. Using taxpayer money, Newsom awarded the firm a whopping $9.6 million to assist him with PG&E's bankruptcy. Publicly, Newsom spoke glowingly about the law firm, but he did not disclose that O'Melveny and Myers worked on behalf of PG&E for at least 2 decades, and as recently as 2017, the year before the Camp Fire. Documents show that as the bill was being drafted, Newsom held meetings with PG&E executives. On June 18th, 2019, Newsom met with PG&E CEO Bill Johnson, Senior VP John Simon, CFO Jason Wells, and more. Newsom would go on to sign the legislation that O'Melveny and Myers, private attorneys, wrote into law. And it's pretty clear that the legislation was crafted specifically to provide financial protections for PG&E and its shareholders. AB 1054 created new safety certificates that utility companies could apply for. That safety certificate allows PG&E, along with the 2 other investor-owned utility companies in the state, to tap into a $21 billion state insurance fund that is half paid for by the utilities and half paid for by customers through a surcharge on power bills. In other words, if the company is granted the certification, it protects shareholders from having to pay for any damages that their company caused and instead have the state insurance fund pay out the damages. Unsurprisingly, PG&E applied right away for these safety certificates and was soon granted its first certification. There was absolutely no indication that they had improved or upgraded its century-old equipment. They were granted the certificate because they had a plan to be safe. But that so-called plan never came to fruition. They never cut down the trees they were supposed to cut down. They never went on to inspect the hooks suspending power lines or any of their aging equipment. But the safety certificate was a game changer. Not for the residents of California, of course. Not for PG&E's victims who were yet to be paid in damages, but for PG&E specifically. Before the governor's bill, power companies couldn't bill the cost of wildfire damage to their customers unless they proved they acted prudently or reasonably. The governor's bill changed the rules. It automatically deems a power company reasonable if it has a safety certificate. More than that, even if someone manages to prove the utility was unreasonable in causing a fire, the governor's bill capped how much it could hurt the shareholders' profits. Are you guys getting the idea of who Gavin Newsom really is? I really want you to take this in. Because again, my hatred for him didn't just come out of nowhere. He is absolute sleazy trash. And guess what? Just 2 months after PG&E received their first safety certification, PG&E's transmission lines sparked the Kincade Fire in October of 2019. Cal Fire's investigation found the utility company at fault. Every fire season, state investigators pointed fingers at PG&E's recklessness and how their unwillingness to update their equipment has led to more wildfires. Yet every year, they're awarded new safety certificates. PG&E went on to face 4 new manslaughter charges for the 2020 Zogg fire. The utility company also sparked the massive Dixie Fire in 2021. PG&E's safety certificate was renewed just 1 month later. 1 month later. PG&E has been able to skirt upgrading its faulty equipment with the help of LaFonza Butler, the very woman Newsom just handpicked to fill Dianne Feinstein's Senate seat. Butler worked as a consultant at SCRB Strategies, a consulting firm that has managed Gavin Newsom's political campaigns. PG&E retained SCRB Strategies at a time when the utility firm was battling state regulators over upgrades necessary to prevent wildfires and the fallout over a gas explosion that killed 8 and injured 58 residents in San Bruno, California. The company paid Butler's firm $1.1 million, records show. Butler is now one of the most powerful people in America because Newsom gifted her a Senate seat that she never had to run for. She's never held elected office, but clearly she's a seasoned vet in doing what our politicians do best, taking money from corporate interests and awarding them profits and protection in return. But let's get back to the safety certificates. Who grants them, and why is PG&E able to renew its certification year after year despite all of these devastating disasters? The California Public Utilities Commission, or CPU, signs off on the certificates. The commission is appointed by Gavin Newsom, and former members of the commission allege that Newsom micromanages and pressures them to sign off on the certificates. But I'm not done yet. You guys remember this controversy?
You were telling everyone they couldn't go inside restaurants,
right?
But you did it, and you got caught at French Laundry.
Probably should have gone to the French Laundry.
No, it was a dumb mistake. It was a terrible mistake. It wasn't illegal. It was wrong, and I totally violated the spirit of what I was preaching, and it was wrong, and I own that. I own that. And you know what? For the grace of God, no one else has ever made a mistake. I guess I did. I own that.
Okay, everybody makes mistakes. However, that was a dumb one.
But it was dumb.
It was, I agree.
And I own it.
Wow, 2 scumbags in one shot. I mean, can anyone really handle all that? Everyone was so focused on the fact that Newsom was caught dining with lobbyists at a swanky Napa Valley restaurant without a mask during the pandemic. But who he was dining with was a far more interesting story. The gathering was actually a birthday dinner for Jason Kinney. Who's Jason Kinney? Well, it's one of Newsom's close friends of 20 years. According to ABC 10, in the months before the dinner party, bankruptcy court documents show hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from PG&E's checkbook to Axiom Advisors, the lobbying firm owned by Jason Kinney. Kinney's name shows up on the firm's billable hours, working for some of PG&E's biggest unsecured creditors. Under services rendered on the bill, the first things you'll see are the passage of AB 1054 and the approval by Governor Gavin Newsom of PG&E's bankruptcy plan. More on that disgusting excuse for a bankruptcy plan in just a minute. Now, Axiom reported working with the governor's office to see all of it through. PG&E's bankruptcy delivered for Kinney's clients. The plan paid them cash in full plus interest. But many of the actual victims of the Camp Fire have yet to receive any restitution from PG&E. Almost 5 years after the fire, Paradise residents are still camping where their houses once stood. The Fire Victim Trust Fund that was set up following PG&E's bankruptcy was supposed to receive $13.5 billion from PG&E, but the utility company only paid half of that in cash. The other half was supposed to be paid as shares in PG&E stock. Almost a year after the power company exited bankruptcy, the value of those shares tanked, likely due to the, yearly wildfires their company sparks. The shares that were initially valued at $6.75 billion were soon worth just $4.8 billion, which robbed the fire victims of nearly $2 billion. And that was before the 2021 fire season and before the Dixie Fire. In other words, due to the company's continued negligence, the value of the shares paid to the victims' trust kept tanking. And just think about how sick this whole situation is. The structure of the bankruptcy agreement places the victims in this horrible position of having to root for the success of the very company that destroyed their lives. They're left with no choice because they need resources to rebuild their lives. But the stock was never even worth the amount the victims were told they were when the bankruptcy plan was voted on. From the day PG&E exited bankruptcy, victims needed the stock price to go up another 56% to be made whole. And the retired Judge John Trotter, overseeing the trust fund, told the victims, and I quote, "It's important for you to want PG&E to do well." That guy gets paid $1,500 an hour from the victim settlement to manage their money. So again, if you're curious why I hold such deep disdain for Governor Newsom, understand that it doesn't come from thin air. I'm not making things up. I'm a Californian. I've been a Californian all my life. The leadership that we see in this state is not only abysmal, it's corrupt, and when it comes to Newsom, just flat out evil. We're talking about a private utility company that pleaded guilty to manslaughter. And what does Gavin Newsom do? He swoops right in and works hard to ensure that he provides cover and protection for them so they are preemptively cleared of any wrongdoing. Thanks to these so-called safety certifications that he pressures, these appointed individuals to sign off on. And this is just one story. There's so much more to get to. The fact that he vetoed a bill that would offer unemployment benefits to striking workers. The fact that he shut down 2 state prisons without any plan on what would happen to them next. The fact that that then led to our county prisons being so crowded that they had no choice but to release all sorts of violent offenders into the public. There's so much to get to when it comes to Governor Gavin Newsom. And for the Democratic establishment propping him up for a presidential run, I'd be careful. Because if there's anything I care about, if there's anything that I want to accomplish more than anything, it's to ensure that the general public knows who Gavin Newsom really is. He's absolute scum. He is evil, and he does not value human lives when his own political career and his own corruption is on the line. That's who Governor Gavin Newsom is. So the next time he wants to point fingers at other governors, like the Republican governor of Florida, maybe he should look inward because he's no better. In fact, when it comes to what he did in protecting these private utility companies, I would argue he might be worse.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.